This video is brought to you by Surfshark. Stick around to hear more about the discount they are providing to the entire upper echelon community. Okay, right off the bat, I want to clarify something. Unlike many other games and companies that I cover on this channel, Axie Infinity, developed by Sky Mavis, is not an outright scam. The developers are not out to swindle anyone here, at least not in my opinion, and the premise of the game, as far as I can tell, is not intentionally predatory. In truth, the game has offered a fleeting yet valuable option for many people around the world to create an actual income stream from it, but this economic business model, in my opinion, again, is completely unsustainable. Today, I want to go over precisely why I believe that Axie Infinity, aside from multi-$100 million security breaches and various other developmental or technological struggles, will fail as a result of intrinsic economic flaws. Basically, this game is built on a foundation that simply cannot provide what people expect long-term, which will invariably lead to economic collapse. Let's start with a brief description of what the game actually is, because many people might be unaware. Axie Infinity is basically jank-ass NFT Pokemon that sells itself by claiming that you can build a legitimate revenue stream if you participate in their economy. Some people may be inclined to dispute this, pretending that there is some other primary motivation for explosive interest in the game, so let me just dispel that right away. According to a social media poll done by the co-founder of Axie Infinity, 48% of responses claim that the economy of the game is its most appealing aspect. In addition, according to Player Counter, over 40% of the game's player base is from the Philippines. This is where I basically have to say, just trust me on this, but this weekend I'm actually going to New York City to a major news network studio and shooting part of a documentary about this exact subject. I'll be there to speak about gaming, play-to-earn economies, and crypto as part of their official project, and my source for this claim is someone I've been in contact with who is just in the Philippines researching this exact topic. I'm not sure precisely how much I can say about all this, so I won't go into any more detail until the movie is actually done, but rest assured when it is, I'll provide links and discuss it thoroughly. Anyway, the point is, Axie Infinity, as per boots-on-the-ground reporting from the Philippines, is a cultural phenomenon there. It's everywhere. It is not a game, it is a revenue stream. It's not a hobby or a fun side activity, it's income potential. And when nearly half of your overall audience is from a specific nation with a specific goal of earning money to supplement household income, your game, quote unquote, is not so much a game as it is a kind of job. So why does this matter? It matters because the way I see it, this game's economy is completely unsustainable, and when it collapses, which it kind of already has to some degree, there will be widespread and severe ramifications in multiple separate developing nations around the world. Okay, time for today's video sponsor, which is, once again, Surfshark. Having a VPN has never been more important than it is right now. I'll stay away from geopolitical controversy here, but being able to circumvent governmental censorship is a good thing. Having the ability to access the news you want from sources you trust, even when the government doesn't want you to, is valuable to say the least, and Surfshark can do exactly that. Going further, VPNs are set up to protect against invasive or disruptive advertising. They protect user data, and by changing your digital location, you can even access more content on websites like Netflix due to various different licensing contracts. All in all, the value of a VPN is only ever increasing, and thus I am very happy to be partnered up with Surfshark. Keeping it short, sweet, and to the point, Surfshark is offering 83% off and 3 full months free if you click the link down below in the description and use promo code Echelon right now. Again, that's 83% off and 3 full months free using the link down below and code Echelon. Big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring the channel. Alright, in order to establish why the economic functions are totally unsustainable, we need to describe the system as it exists right now. Axie Infinity is, for lack of a better term, jank-ass Pokemon, and primarily operates around two different crypto tokens. There is AXS, also known as Axie Slivers, which are the governance tokens, and SLP, also known as Smooth Love Potion, which facilitates different actions. To get started, you need a team of 3 different Axies to then be used as a battle squad against other players. At the time of this video, the cheapest Axies on the entire marketplace are about $17, but over the past year, the prices have wildly fluctuated, even going as high as over $1,000 to assemble your first team, with about $300 per Axie in that instance. With that in mind, many people interested in this game's economic potential, remember the game's largest audiences exist in relatively impoverished countries or nations, the largest being the Philippines, and the second largest, Venezuela, are unable to gain access to the game without a scholarship. Scholarships, despite their ridiculous name, are just sponsors, who provide the Axies to new players in return for a cut of earnings, often as high as 30%. That's where the money is, but that is also a much smaller percentage of players who now operate as a sort of, kind of, pseudo-landlord in the game, if you will. Once you have your Axies, whether you buy them or get them through scholarship, whatever it may be, you can do a number of different things. In terms of raw gameplay, it's rather unimpressive. I would say that this is on par with a low to mid-grade but functional indie project on Steam, probably a low-grade indie project, but despite my own lack of enthusiasm here for the actual product, there are several different features to choose from. Keep in mind, the entire premise of this game is to earn SLP or AXS, and redeem that for actual currency. At one point, there were daily quests and adventures. In addition, there is an arena function, battling other players, and there's also a breeding structure that uses your SLP to acquire more axies. Now, you'll notice I said at one point, because the adventure mode and the daily quests have been removed. Previously, you could earn about 50 SLP from the adventure mode and a smaller but substantial amount from the daily quest as well, but these incentives were lowered to 0, actually, in order to, quote, avoid total and permanent economic collapse, end quote. That's pretty severe and comes directly from the developer's own Substack. This change was made in early February because the game was experiencing, as stated in the quote, a complete economic meltdown. From April 2021 to January, 2022, SLP, the primary income token for Axie players, had crashed by nearly 98% from its all-time high. And the effects of this, primarily on low-income players utilizing the scholarship function, is profound. According to extensive research done by analytics firm Navic, the average amount that high-level independent players can earn at various different MMR ratings had fallen below the average daily wage in the Philippines. This drop in revenue is compounded when players did not have 60 energy and instead played with 20 energy. You get more energy from having more axies, but Sky Mavis themselves have estimated that 60 to 65% of all their players are scholars, and the scholarship program exists to circumvent a high barrier of entry. Logically, scholarship players are probably not going to have the number of axies required to compete with more than 20 energy. On top of this, players who do utilize the scholarship program have much lower income potential, and at the absolute bottom are players that have access to just 20 energy while also being enrolled in the scholarship program. According to Navic, those players were, as of October 2021, and also this is the majority of players in Axie Infinity, those players were falling not just below the average daily wage, but also falling below the minimum daily wage. But it gets worse. These figures are based on a price point of 6 to 9 cents per SLP. In late October of 2021, that was the range the token was in, but in just 3 more months, the token price would collapse below 1 penny, right? Below a single penny. And even now, after the intervention to stave off total and permanent economic collapse, the token price sits well below 2 cents. These same income figures, where average participants in developing nations like the Philippines or Venezuela were dropping below minimum wage in daily income potential, have been cut down further by over 70 to 80%. From what I've been told by someone who recently returned from the Philippines researching, again, this very same subject, players are now holding their SLP hoping for the price to go up desperately because, as it stands, the income potential is almost non-existent. Now, bear with me because this might seem complicated, but we have to paint a complete and comprehensive picture of what is actually building behind the scenes right now. In their desperate economic overhaul, Sky Mavis, the developers, made numerous different changes to the game's reward system that were not just limited to adventure mode and daily quests. If we read their Substack, we can see the following, quote, for Season 20, we've expanded the number of leaderboard slots to 300,000 and increased the amount of AXS we're giving out to 117.676 thousand. This will supercharge the competitive scene, Axie scene, and create more demand for quality Axie teams in the ecosystem, right? That's important. Quality Axie teams in the ecosystem. This equates to a 6 million USD equivalent prize pool for Season 20. This will allow us to further adjust arena rewards. The highest levels will have their rewards be most affected, as they will also have more AXS rewards to compete for. In addition, we will be adding back 1 SLP per win for players under 800 MMR. This will bring some utility to weaker Axies and encourage players to practice even if they're still learning or having difficulty with the game. Advancements with our bot detection system, as well as reduced earnings for bots, have also made reintroduction of these rewards possible. End quote. Simplified, the developers are pushing people into the arena system to fight against other players and away from single-player rudimentary tasks. They did this while simultaneously removing all rewards from their secondary systems because the supply of SLP was rising exponentially to a point of over 12 billion in circulation at the time of this research. The game itself was and is inherently inflationary because the entire premise behind a majority of users is to earn money. The way you earn money is generating, but not consuming, SLP. The players just getting started are the ones who consume the token, primarily, thus creating more Axies and positioning themselves better in the ecosystem right from the get-go. But the Axies themselves and the SLP they are inevitably used to generate after that only ever increase in number. Right now, because of the economic downturn that has already reared its ugly head in this game, there are billions of SLP being held simply waiting for an exit point. Even after the economic intervention by the developers, prices barely rebounded to over 3 pennies before crashing back down again, and the fundamental structure here doesn't work. In order to pay millions of people more money than they actually put in, which is the obvious expectation behind play-to-earn economics in general, more money needs to go into the game than it does out of the game. But the only way for that to actually happen is for the player base to rise dramatically and perpetually without stopping forever. New players are the ones putting money in because it's entirely front loaded. Once they have the axies that they've built up and they're ready to earn, then they're just trying to extract money, right? They put money in to get to a basis where they can then extract money from the system. But as we have demonstrated, the majority of them are doing this through lending platforms and with an explicit expectation of pulling out an actual livable wage after that fact. Once they've exceeded that barrier of entry, which is moderate to high, they start to sell their SLP, adding to a never-ending deluge of sellers attempting to extract capital all day, every day. If the player base is expanding at a rate where the amount of resources required by new players exceeds the amount of resources being sold by existing players, the price will naturally rise. Everyone makes money. However, if the amount of resources required by new players falls below the amount of resources aggressively sold by an ever-expanding army of existing players all day, every day, the price of the token will drop. Picture this. If the relative player base expansion of Axie Infinity drops to 0, with no one actually adding any fresh capital into the system from their own pockets, and everyone expecting a return and trying to extract money from the system, the majority of players already fall into this category, by the way, with more reaching that point every single day. But if that happens, well, what's the answer here? Where does the money come from? Sky Mavis has already taken drastic and unsuccessful steps to reduce the amount of SLP in circulation, and they have clearly begun to incentivize and even push players into the arena. By restructuring the game's payout mechanisms to favor competition rather than simplistic daily tasks, you guarantee, and this is probably what they were aiming for, you guarantee a much smaller number of players will actually benefit from those systems. We see this play out across the entire gaming space already, with perhaps no better example than Fortnite. You can technically become a millionaire in Fortnite by winning against other players, but how many people actually get there, right? There's basically a couple or one. Compare the number of people trying to make money versus the number of people actually succeeding, and you will see a tremendous disparity because not everyone can always walk away with more money than they put in. Likewise, with Axie Infinity, a push towards more competitive structures where meta stats, team composition, and higher cost axies dominate an MMR-oriented reward structure, which, by the way, has usually a typical bell curve, which means that most players are in the middle and very few on the high end, and those are the ones that'll make the money, the very small number on the high end, and not everyone in the middle or the bottom. But anyway, the number of players capable of making a living will fall dramatically. When a supermajority of your players go from making more than minimum wage to less than minimum wage, to basically nothing, they will stop playing. And the subsequent drop in player base, more precisely the lack of player influx to compensate for existing player sell orders, will totally eviscerate the business model of Axie Infinity. The problem is inextricably linked to how the game started. Play to earn doesn't actually work on its own. There is empirical evidence that the majority of people engaging with Axie Infinity right now only do so for profit, and this will lead, without fail, to a reliance on new player capital to pay out existing player profit. And what does that sound like? Play-to-earn systems will only work if they are meshed into an already established, appealing, and independently successful ecosystem. Even then, it's quite possible that play-to-earn systems would destroy that ecosystem that was already successful, but when the expectation is get more money out than you ever put in, by an incredible margin, I might add, you create a fairly obvious and inevitable collapse. Video game economies are already balanced on a razor's edge. Take New World, for example, which experienced a horrible deflationary crisis after launch, leading to prices bottoming out in a way that drove players away from the game. I mean, a lot of other things drove them away as well, but that definitely played a part. This happened because the earning potential for gold was inadequate versus the mandatory cost mechanisms in the game, leading to an economic crisis. New World is developed by Amazon, a company with more money and resources than almost the entire cryptocurrency market, period. Even they had problems balancing in-game economics to a point where inflow and outflow of purely digital currency was even close to aligned. Sky Mavis, they're playing with an economy that isn't just tied to digital gameplay functions, it is tied to personal livelihood all around the world for millions of people. How they interface with this economy matters a whole lot more than something like New World ever has or could, and the dedication of their audience to grind and hold their tokens, with the express intention to sell them only at a profit, means that there will always be a battle to somehow create more money than has actually been put into the system at any given point in time. This makes no mention of additional problems like a $600 million hack that left Axie Infinity just basically bleeding on the pavement. Search interest for the game is steadily declining as we speak, and to underline exactly which populations are most susceptible to these problems, Google Trends can show us that the top 5 countries searching for information about this game right now are the Philippines, Venezuela, Cuba, Argentina, and Singapore. All of these countries have extremely high poverty rates, and this level of interest demonstrates that the only mainstream demand for this game, right, really the only mainstream demand, is born of an expectation that users can earn money from it. Now, it is possible that Axie can leverage other income streams to supplement the inevitable discrepancy in demand, but so far that has not happened, right? They could do it through advertising or all sorts of other different like sponsorships from corporations or brands, right? It's possible, but so far it hasn't happened. They would need to implement also a dynamic difficulty adjustment mechanism for the rate at which SLP is earned, something they have sort of already done with their push towards MMR-based arena gameplay, but that kind of system, as we previously discussed in this very video, where getting SLP becomes harder and harder the more people are trying to do it, aka the arena, in a pseudo-quasi sort of way, will cause a dramatic change in player-based behavior as well as growth. The perfect example of this would be Bitcoin, right? So when you're mining Bitcoin, the more people do it and the more of it gets mined, the harder it is to mine, right? So it went from being easy to get and everybody was getting a lot of it in the early days to being really hard to get and nobody can get any and you get tiny, tiny, tiny fractions of it because so many people are trying to do it. They kind of need a similar system to that if they're going to have any sort of sustainability here. Any price breakout in the near term will be crushed by what I would speculate are billions of tokens just waiting around to be sold. As a particular demographic abandons the game due to lack of earning potential, which is the only reason they're there in the first place, that's the majority of players, by the way, the required influx of capital due to organic rapid adoption will disappear along with them as a result. And when you look at everything in context, including their own steps to remedy a self-recognized impending and, by their own words, permanent collapse that failed to lead to any sort of meaningful rally, by the way, I am skeptical of Axie Infinity being anything other than a dying flash in the pan that was built upon a flawed business model from day one. The largest argument I ran into while making this video from community members was, well, other economic systems are just as broken. And then, fiat is a scam, so why do you rag on Axie? Fiat is the problem. My response is that defending something inherently as well as deeply flawed by saying, yeah, but that other thing that we aren't even talking about is more flawed and that exists, is not actually a valid defense at all. I see no version of this where Axie Infinity continues to allow for widespread, meaningful earning potential, and the only outcome I would really accept as likely is that the game consolidates rapidly and tremendously to a much smaller audience while stratifying into an extreme income disparity within the platform, where only a select few gaming guilds and players benefit, while the rest are subjected to high fees and reduced rewards. A significantly smaller new player churn may prop that up, right, for quite some time, but the model is intrinsically flawed and cannot thrive as it exists today. My opinion, Axie Infinity is fundamentally flawed, and thus, economically doomed. That's it. If you want to support my work, there are links down below, primarily locals and Patreon for a monthly fee, also Odyssey, a YouTube platform alternative, another creator to check out, merchandise, social media, and of course, Surfshark. Click that link down below for a discount, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.